business trips. Business trips. Remember, her business was that of prostitution. In Glasgow, by the way, this whole case takes place in England. Okay, I don't think that was even mentioned anywhere. So she was away on business trips in Glasgow often, but her absences were actually periods of respite for Mary, who was subject to abuse, both mental and physical, when her mother was present. Betty's own sister witnessed Betty try to give Mary away to a woman who had been unsuccessfully trying to adopt. The sister quickly recovered Mary herself. It was like a complete stranger that Betty, the mother, the 16-year-old mother, ran into this woman who was like, I can't have kids and I'm having trouble at times. She's like, here, take my kid. I don't want her. Take her. In truth, the sister should have looked the other way and let this woman take Mary. Seriously, but that's retrospect, you know. So, Mary was also strangely accident-prone, supposedly. She once, quote, fell from a window and on another occasion, quote, accidentally overdosed on sleeping pills. Some attribute the accidents to Betty's determination to rid herself of an encumbrance, while others see the symptoms of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Betty longed for the attention and sympathy her daughter's accidents brought her. So, It was just there because the place was abandoned and it was just garbage. But in the absence of better information, they assumed that he had swallowed the pills, and his death was ruled an accident. But Martin's family might have started to suspect otherwise when little Mary Bell showed up on their doorstep in the days after his death and asked to see him. His mother gently explained to her that Martin was dead, and she said, "I know. I want to see his body in the coffin." And Martin's mother slammed the door in her face. Shortly after that, Mary and her friend Norma, by the way, Norma was 13, so she was 2 years older than Mary at this point, and they say Mary was like the ringleader of the two, and that Norma might have been a little bit slow. So, shortly after, Mary and her friend Norma broke into a nursery school and vandalized it with notes taking responsibility for Martin Brown's death and promising to kill again. Police assumed the notes were a morbid prank. For the nursery school, this was just the latest and most disturbing in a series of break-ins. They installed an alarm system after that. And that was a smart choice because it caught Mary and Norma at the scene of the crime several nights later. But as they were simply loitering outside when the police arrived, they were let off the hook. In the meantime, Mary was going around telling her classmates what she had done. Her reputation as a show-off and a liar prevented anyone from taking her seriously, though. That is, until another boy turned up dead. On July 31st, 2 months after the first murder, Mary and Norma killed 3-year-old Brian Howe by strangulation. This time, Bell mutilated his body afterwards with scissors. When Brian's sister went looking for him, Mary and Norma offered to help. Doesn't that always seem to happen with killers? Aren't they oftentimes trying to help for some reason? It's kind of weird, right? Like when you think that you would want to get as far away as possible. But no. So, Mary and Norma offered to help. They searched the neighborhood, and Mary even pointed out the concrete blocks that hid his body. She's like, "Look there," where she knew his body was. But Norma said he wouldn't be there, and Brian's sister moved on. When Brian's body was finally found, the neighborhood was panicked. 2 boys were dead in 2 months. Police interviewed local children, hoping someone had seen something that would lead to a suspect. They received a shock when the coroner's report came back as Brian's blood had cooled. New marks appeared on his chest. Someone had used a razor blade to scratch the letter M onto his torso, M as in Mary. And there was another disturbing note: the lack of force used in the attack suggested Brian's killer might be a child. Mary and Norma did a poor job of disguising their interest in the investigation in their interviews with police. Both acted strangely. Norma was excited and Mary evasive, especially when police pointed out that she had been seen with Brian Howe on the day of his death. On the day of Brian's burial, Mary was spotted lurking outside his house. She even laughed and rubbed her hands life-size coffin. Sick. Seriously. They called her back for a second interview, and Mary, perhaps sensing investigators were closing in, made up a story about having seen an 8-year-old boy hit Brian on the day he died. The boy, she said, had been carrying a pair of broken scissors. That was Mary Bell's big mistake. The mutilation of the body with the scissors had been kept from the press and public. It was a detail only known to investigators and one other person, Brian's murderer. Both Norma and Mary broke down under further questioning. Norma began cooperating with police and implicated Mary, who herself admitted to being present during Brian Howe's murder, but tried to place the blame on Norma. Both girls were charged and a trial date was set. At the trial, the prosecutor told the court that Bell's reason for committing the murders was solely for the pleasure and excitement of killing. Meanwhile, the British press referred to her as evil-born. The jury agreed that Mary Bell had committed the murders and handed down a guilty verdict in December. Manslaughter, not murder, was the conviction, as court psychiatrists had convinced the jury that Mary Bell showed classic symptoms of psychopathy and could not be held fully responsible for her actions. Norma Bell was regarded as an unwilling accomplice who had fallen under a bad influence, and she was acquitted. The judge concluded that Mary was a dangerous person and a serious threat to other children. Yep, think so. She was sentenced to be imprisoned at Her Majesty's pleasure, which is a British legal term that denotes an indeterminate sentence, basically until the powers that be feels like it's appropriate to let you out. Apparently, the powers that be were impressed with Bell's treatment and rehabilitation and felt like it was appropriate to let her out in 1980. She was released on license, which meant that she was technically still serving her sentence, but was able to do so while living in the community under strict probation. And, believe it or not, the government gave her a new identity to provide her with a chance at a new life and protect her from tabloids. Even still, she was forced to move several times to escape hounding by tabloids, newspapers, and the general public, which somehow always found ways of tracking her down. Things grew worse for Mary after she had her daughter in 1984. Her daughter did not know about the mother's crimes until she was 14, when a tabloid was able to find Bell's common-law husband and thus track Bell down. Today, Bell is in protective custody at a secret address